Hello, well, I'm Abby Abelness with Healing Tree International, and I'm in Senator Mastriano's office here in the Harrisburg Capitol. And I think we got together related to this, talking together because we had a Restoring the Holy Seed of a Nation event that came out of Philadelphia to the nation, and that got so much popularity. We got 10,000 people watching it. And as a result of that, actually, the Holy Seed of a Nation is what William Penn, our first governor and founder, had called this state, that we would be bringing forth the holy governance for our nation and
That's
the
right.
nations, that it would be a precedent to the other nations. And so as a result of that event, we actually now are meeting in Pittsburgh and then Harrisburg on the July 2nd and 3rd in Harrisburg, and then coming to Gettysburg, to your territory.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's so profound that you're from the territory of the battle of brother against brother in our own nation.
Yeah.
And this is the season when the nation is in that battle. And so here you are, positioned to be able to be a voice for the people. And I just really want to commend you that you've been doing Facebook Live every day. You've been letting your constituents in the whole state know what's going on at the Capitol and raising their awareness to be able to make sure this is a government of the people, for the people. And so I want to thank you for that. And I'd just like to start by asking you, how did you get this vision to even get in this position and to be able to raise this awareness so profoundly?
So in the Army, I'm entering my retirement months. It's 2017. I've wrapped up more than 30 years on active duty. And I'm having a hard time with that. Obviously, so much of who you are is invested in the Army, the uniform, and everything, the deployments, the commitment to the nation. And beyond that, I was struggling with that I was handing things over in our state and nation pretty bad as compared to how I got it from my dad in the 80s to my son. And so concern out of the condition of the state, the lack of economic prosperity at the time, the lack of security, and we are no longer as good as we were when I got it from my dad. And I really felt like my generation dropped the ball. And I know it's hard words, but we really did. We were not good stewards with our nation's freedoms. And we see that really playing out this year with how Governor Wolf is running amok with our freedoms and trotting upon our basic freedoms and rights. I would have never imagined a year ago when I was sworn in that we'd be struggling for basic freedoms, our 14th Constitutional Amendment, the Pennsylvania Constitution, for people to live their lives, run their businesses, not be encumbered, bossed around. The governor thinks that he's giving us freedom by ordering us to wear a mask. I mean, it's very Orwellian. It's 1984 newspeak. It's terrifying. And so as I was complaining about everything, and I was at a low point of this, and I was complaining to a young man, and I'm like, so what was the 30 years of service all about? I love my country as much as anyone else does, and I sacrificed willingly. It's all I wanted to do, but the sacrifice seemed like it was for naught. And then this young man looked at me and he said, "Well, Colonel, do something about it." And I'm like, oh man, it's so easy for each of us to whine and to complain, and kind of yell at the darkness there. But what is our part in fighting the darkness and fighting for freedom and securing our freedoms and rights? And so it was that really sparked an endeavor to run for office. I never wanted to do that. I had all the excuses that any of us would have: not wealthy, not politically connected. I was prohibited by law from being active politically as an officer in the Army, which is a good thing. We don't want our officers active politically when they're on active duty. So I had all the excuses and reasons, not the resources. But if you don't do it, who else will? And so I ended up here. I mean, this is completely outside of God's plan. Normally, a senior officer in the military, we have so many skills that the federal government's invested so much in us. They normally want to keep you on, so either you get a federal job as a civilian to stay on and continue doing, different things like strategy would have been mine. And then, or you get hired by a contractor doing the similar thing, and you kind of ride off into the sunset. And I think too many of us here want to ride off to the sunset. And so I'm not more special or better than anyone else here. It's just, you think about American Christians, I'm probably going a bit long here, but American Christians, we'll talk about how bad things are. And this is just a broad brush here, so please forgive me, my brothers and sisters out there. This is generally speaking. We'll talk about how bad things are in a country and how our culture slipped away and how we've forgotten God. As Abraham Lincoln said in 1863, why did this happen? We've forgotten God. And so many American Christians, we've become so passive and lazy. We just throw up our hands and say, it's God's will. It's God's will. It'll work out. And that is a bunch of nonsense. So, because where do you get that from the Bible? Where is it God's will that abortion exists in a nation, and 60 million dead babies on? Where is it his will that Governor Wolf be trotting upon our freedoms and rights? Where is it his will that our Secretary of Health would unleash COVID-19 positive into the elder care facilities and kill 70% of the dead as a result of that policy? That's not God's will. God's will is that nobody should perish, but all should come to salvation. It's right there. That's his will, that everyone would come to salvation, none would perish. And so this passivity here has created an excuse and laziness for inaction in America. And so we've been handed some beautiful freedoms here at great price and cost. Many of us haven't paid a cent for it, and we've been bad stewards with it. So I think across, yes, God can intervene in history and change things, but for some reason, just show me an instance where he did not use a man or woman. Where did he not use a person? And you think about, Queen Esther. There she is, a Jewish young lady in the Persian Medes Empire. King Xerxes looking for a new wife. She's beautiful. She's taken on, long story comes. She ends up in the king's court. But there's strict rules. She can't visit a king unless he calls for her. And if she goes visit him without being summoned, she'll be killed. And her uncle Mordecai finds out there's a plot to wipe out her people, sends her a note saying, perhaps you've been raised up to such a royal position for such a time as this. And then he goes on to say, if you don't do anything, you and your people will die. And God will raise up a deliverer elsewhere, but you'll die. And I take that to heart. You think about 1934 Germany. We have, Adolf Hitler's rising through. He was elected to office in the Weimar Republic. So that's the interwar republic, the Democrat-style government the Germans had. He gets 40% of the vote, but he's not quite in charge yet. And there's this retired General von Schleicher, hero from the First World War. General von Schleicher is the last guy that can stop Hitler in 1934. He can do it. He has his meeting with Hitler, and von Schleicher chickens out. He slips into Prussian officer role, just kind of sits there and listens and takes all the accusations. Hitler's calling him names and all that. It was really the last chance he had. And so Schleicher, he misses his chance to stop Hitler. Hitler rises to power, and he dies, just like Mordecai warned Esther, if you don't do your part, you and your people die. So God raised up a deliverer from elsewhere. That deliverer from elsewhere was the United States Army on the other side of the world. It's going to take us 10 years to get there. So think about, had Schleicher done his part, history would have been changed. There would have been no Adolf Hitler leading Germany. But instead, a new deliverer was raised up, and it took us a lot of time to get there and millions of dead before we got there. That wasn't God's will. Schleicher chickened out. You think about when God called Gideon. Gideon got the call, and then he ran and hid behind a wine press. And then, of course, he had the big thing, with the fleece, and people could read about it in the Bible, the whole thing with the fleece in Judges. But in the end, he did his part. And this guy who was, a chicken, ended up changing history and fighting off some of Israel's greatest enemies at the time here. So God is always looking for men and women like you and me to stand in the gap. You get the call. It's not going to be something you want to do. It's going to be something you're uncomfortable doing, but he'll equip you to do it.
So you can see the hand of God actually in your life, because you were trained in the military, and so you know how to go into a battle and do something about it. When a lot of people would be afraid of the battle, they wouldn't know what to do, but they would follow a leader into it if the leader knew how to take them. And so you have helped the constituents that they want to do something, they don't know what to do. And so you're informing them, you're educating about what's happening, what bills are coming forth, and you're rallying the troops of the believers who want to do something, but they don't know how to move. So again, I thank you for how you've shown this leadership. It's by the divine hand of the providence of God that he raised you up, even from the Adams County area where the battle of the nation was, of the division of the nation. And now you're coming up with strategy to continue that. And I actually think, Abraham Lincoln, when the war was over, he knew maybe the battles were over, but there was still healing to take place for the nation. There was still a unity that needed to happen. And he even said in his Gettysburg Address that it's for us, the living, to continue this, and that he just hoped that there would still be freedom for all, for the people, by the people. And so it seems like God raised you to be able to carry this out, to continue what was even spoken from leaders from before.
Well, God has a perfect plan for each of our lives. And on one of our posters, we had Ephesians 3:20 in the corner. God can do more than you can imagine or think. And, his perfect plan for each of our lives, I don't know what it is. It'll be different for each of us here, but he will call people to make a difference. You look across the ages here, Martin Luther facing a corrupt Western church in 1517, Germany, Europe, Holy Roman Empire, and putting his 95 thesis on the church, the Wittenberg Castle Church door, and changed history. He didn't intend that, and finds himself on trial in 1521 in Worms, Germany, before the emperor and the Pope's representative. Here's your chance to recant. Here I stand, I can do no other, so help me God. And this one man, a nondescript monk from Germany here, changed history. And so there's so many stories. As a person with a PhD in history really is biographies writ large. It's about people, stories about you and me. And so many people out there think so low of themselves. Growing up, they may have heard a mom, dad, certainly a friend, somebody in school, a relative. You'll never amount to anything. You're trash. You're this or that. And it's funny, those voices will echo loud in your ear right when you're willing to step out to do something risky, maybe something great. And I'll just tell people that's a lie from the pit of hell, because God can make you something that you cannot imagine or think. He has a plan for you. It might not be your vision or something you want to do. And if he's calling you, I'm going to guarantee you it's not something actually you probably ever imagined you're going to do. I mean, in some cases, it's probably true that, yeah, you always had that burden in your heart. I get it. But generally speaking, in my life experience, he pulls you out of your comfort zone because, his glory is made perfect in weakness. 1 Corinthians 1:27 says, God uses the foolish to confound the wise and the weak to confound the strong. And that's my story. That's his story. So when we make his story our story, we can change history.
Amen. So as you're raised up to help to raise up the troops, in a sense. So what is your hope as you get all this interest of the constituents across Pennsylvania? What is your hope that the rest of us would raise up to do?
So, obviously, it's my desire that we raise up an active movement of Pennsylvanians to re-secure and reestablish our freedoms and rights. Right now, Governor Wolf has stripped away so many of our essential freedoms here, it's scary. And the doublespeak, the newspeak, I call them the royalists. The royalists in the American Revolution were those that stuck with the British Empire and were calling on it, reporting their neighbors, having their neighbors arrested when they were complying with the king's orders. And we have royalists these days who think it's their duty to be self-appointed do-gooders, to go around and oppress those not wearing masks, or businesses that are open the way they think they should be open, and snitching on them and calling police on them. So we have the royalists in our midst. I'm asking the rest of the patriots across the state here to rise up, stand and fight for your freedoms and rights. They were paid for in so much blood and treasure here. Gettysburg alone was the bloodiest battle in all of North America on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of July, 1863. We're coming up to the anniversary, starting tomorrow. It's very apropos. And had we lost that battle there, surely the British, French, and Spanish nations would have entered the war on the side of the Confederacy, and world history would have changed. So it was so key. And it shows you how God raised up General Meade, who 3 days before was given command. He was given command of the army on the march into Pennsylvania here, and he had 3 days to get it all together, and he was blessed with victory. That's why in the Senate chamber, General Meade's painting is on the right side as you stand at my desk. He was that important to Pennsylvania. But all the men that were down there fighting in the trenches, 95,000 Yankee troops, 70,000 Confederate troops marching across what would become my district today. No, I wasn't there. But you can imagine the armies marching across there in that bloody battle, and it was not a guaranteed victory. Robert E. Lee was like King Midas. The past year, almost every battle he fought, he won. And he would snatch victory out of the jaws of defeat over and over again. A year ago, Gettysburg, the Yankee army was outside of Richmond about to capture the capital of Confederacy. It was underneath the command of General McClellan, and it looked like we're going to knock out the Confederates by capturing their capital. We could debate whether that would have worked or not, but it would have been a significant blow to them. Robert Lee was given command of the army late in June when the previous commander was injured, General Johnson, and within a week, Lee had driven the Yankees to the James River. And we got on our boats and ships and went limping back to D.C. Robert Lee wheeled around, launched an attack at the Second Battle Bull Run, and just constantly, they call him that Sly Fox Lee. And it didn't look so good. So you have this very motivated army here, not really well equipped, but they're fighters. And then they meet here in Gettysburg here, and God shows up, and men and women like you and me rise up and face the challenge, and there's great sacrifice. But we're standing in the shadow of giants and on the shoulders of giants as well here. And we have a huge legacy to carry on. And now it's our time, and we have to make a difference now. So what is my hope? I started these live feeds here that became so popular here, and we reached 3.5 million people the last 28 days across Pennsylvania. I mean, this is powerful. Almost every county tunes into my evening chats, between 50 and 60. And those are only people who actually, put in Facebook where they're from. And so we have this massive reach. And so what's the so what here? We got to fight together. As Benjamin Franklin said in 1776, in the dark days of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, which is about to fall to the British, he said, if we don't hang together, we're going to hang separately. So we really got to hang together.
So President Lincoln's goal in that was really to restore the Union. Do you have any wisdom to tell us on what we can do to help to bring unity in this time of serious division in our nation?
Yeah, so we're facing, I'm talking about the extremists on the left here. We're facing a vicious, determined, united foe that's willing to lie, cheat, and steal, willing to destroy people's reputations of character. They'll call you bigots. They'll call you this and that. You're a phobia. The Democrat Party, one of their leaders in one of my counties, put together a little poster, had disgusting symbols in my name, and they accused me of 7 different phobias. It's interesting to me that for 30 years I had a top secret special access clearance, and so every 3 to 5 years I'd have a renewed investigation. And had I suffered from all those phobias and other things there, I would have never got a top secret clearance. So I'm pretty, I'm still a human with sins that I struggle with here. But as far as those big issues they accuse me of, it's just not there. I'm pretty squeaky clean. So they have to make up stuff. So they're willing to lie, cheat, and steal to advance their agenda, to oppress people, to silence you. And we got to get to the point. And now, as a colonel in the Army, obviously any senior officer, you take, and it's dangerous, you take great pride in your name. My word is my honor kind of thing. And, your good name is a big deal here. But you got to be willing to give it up in the public life, because the left are just nasty, terrible people. They really are. And I hope, it's funny because they'll accuse you of all this stuff here. They'll strain a gnat. They'll strain a gnat out of your problems. I knew you had issues, but they'll ignore the boards in front of their own faces, the massive sins. We see the inconsistencies all over the place. Case in point. We have reopened PA rallies. The governor puts up his barricades on the steps to force us together. I'm out there, meeting people, and I hear from the media and the Wolf administration, Mastriano was so irresponsible. He was shaking hands, not social distancing. How dare he? He's putting the elderly at risk. Literally, I had some of the loonies from my district writing this stuff here. You're putting people at risk. You're so selfish. But when their governor goes out and protests with thousands of people in a county, he said by his own rules can only be 25 or less. He's out there. It's okay. Not a peep from this. So we look for consistency in the argument. The left is willing to lie, cheat, and steal. They're okay with the hypocrisy as long as they advance their agenda. So you keep that in mind in the battle. These people are acting, as insurgents, as enemy insurgents here, and they'll do whatever it takes to win. We have to be as determined, but maintaining our values here. But understanding it's not okay. It's not acceptable. We should not say, okay, that's just how the media is. The media is biased. No, we need to call them out for the hypocrisy and show them their double standards, because hopefully we'll raise up a new generation of journalists who'll say, no, I need to be fair. And hopefully we'll point out to any of the people on the left who actually think for themselves that pointing out the inconsistencies, maybe they'll say, yes, we need to be consistent here. And why, how calling somebody a bigot and a racist and all that, doesn't that make you an intolerant bigot by calling somebody that? They can't see the logical fallacies. So calling them out, it's really hard to do that in love, and extremely hard to do that in kindness, because they're just that nasty. But in the end, the so what is, we have to rise up and be active. Otherwise, we're going to lose everything. So young people out there that were told in college and high school that socialism was fantastic, welcome to your Introduction 101. Compliments of Governor Wolf. Just a flavor of it, just a sampling, because the shelves aren't empty. You're not waiting in bread lines. The toilet paper's back. So this isn't real socialism. But if you want to be told how to live your lives, if you want to be bullied by your neighbors, ratted out by your neighbors, like in East Germany during the Cold War, where I was detained as a 17-year-old kid, if you want to live that kind of life, that's what Governor Wolf has to offer you. So Pennsylvania, it's all or nothing right now.
When you mentioned how do you do this in love, as a person that is a follower of God, you want to have that divine law of love in your heart, like William Penn said. And I'm thinking of when he actually came to face the Indians, and he was trying to figure out how to have good rapport, good faith, and goodwill with them. He didn't know what would happen in a battle that he would get in, but he said, let's see what love will do.
Wow.
And so that's what somehow we have to face all this battle at the same time carrying the divine law of love in our hearts, which is what Penn promoted in the founding, the first frame of government of our nation. And so somehow we have to keep that balance as we go forward. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
So in 1755, my wife's relatives settled at part of what's now Franklin County. Back then it was Cumberland County, but out by Letterkenny. And for 10 years of peace before that, they're fantastic, good Presbyterians, born-again Christians, treated the Indians coming through, and Chief Shingus and his warriors that were hunting, treated them with love, fed the horses, watered the horses, were kindly to them. War breaks out with the instigation of the French, and the Indians join the French side, and they capture one of Rebbe's ancestors, Charles Stewart, and they're going to kill him. And they take his wife and 2 kids as well. And they describe this brutal way they're going to kill him. They vote, yes, we're going to kill him. Go up to Chief Shingus, whom Charles Stewart had a good relationship with here as a Christian, try to be a good Christian witness. And they described what they're going to do to Charles Stewart. And Chief Shingus of the Delaware said, if you hurt this man, you hurt me. If you kill this man, you kill me, in English. And so they had to let him live, but they did force him and his wife to walk all the way to New France, Canada. And both their kids were given away to Indian tribes in Cantaning and elsewhere, to the Mingos, and they wouldn't get their daughter back until 10 years later. So they suffered much, but their lives were saved because of their witness. So it does go far, your Christian witness.
Yes. And really what we want to do is bring healing at the root of this division.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have any last thoughts on how do we do that. Of course, love does heal. If there's anything else you would want to say about bringing healing to this division, this battle that we have in our nation and the nations?
At the temporal side here, and I think I'll focus on that initially and then get to the spiritual side. Temporal side here, we have to walk and live as free men and women. In the Bible it says, if Christ set you free, you're free indeed. So let's walk as free men and women, as Pennsylvanians. Remember the cost of our freedoms. And although the governor's out here with conflicting, contradictory guidance on masks and all, you must do all these things here, or I will punish you with coercive force and what have you. Send out my investigators from the Department of Agriculture to issue you fines. And Secretary Levine will be very angry at you. It's like, so what? No, we're free people. We're going to choose to live as free people, and that's that, Governor. We're going to reassert our rights. He has no moral authority to lecture us anymore. He has there is no laws that he's issuing, and anything that would have given him power, he vetoed, by the way, which I'm thankful for now. But we didn't know how bad this is going to be. So, the legislative body, the House and Senate, we put together legislation to safely reopen Pennsylvania using OSHA and CDC rules. And he could have used those pieces of legislation that passed both, by the way, to actually justify mandating masks, but he vetoed them. So he has no authority to do this. The abuse underneath the emergency order, of course, we've challenged, and it's with the court. Hopefully we'll get a result today, and I believe they're going to have to rule in our favor unless it's just pure activism. Because does the General Assembly have the right under Article 35 to end emergency order? Yes, it does. Simple as that. And then we need to come out in the House and Senate this time, unlike what we failed to do last time, say it's over. And color codes are done, masks are done. Pennsylvanians, we don't have a nanny state here anymore. Safely run your lives. You figure it out. We're not going to tell you, how to do this because you're smart enough to do it on your own here. It's funny because, of course, we never have spikes when there's protests and riots in Pittsburgh and Philly, for all the tragic situation that was taken advantage of by extremists here. Tens of thousands of people in Philadelphia, they're sweating on each other, stealing together. No spikes, but, God forbid we have a car show in Carlisle on a 100-acre lot. There's going to be dangers here. We cannot. So they're going after us. They're going after men and women like us. Because any good traditional conservative thing they're going to discourage church services. They're going to do whatever they can. It's just time to get back together, assert your rights, and say no. Shame on us here. And the centuries of history we have in Pennsylvania. William Penn was a Quaker. He became a Quaker, accepted the Lord as a young man, as a teenager, was thrown in jail for his faith, denounced by his dad for some years. As a result, his dad was ashamed of him because he was a pacifist. And so he crafted our freedoms with that in mind, and it's still in our state constitution now. And, I can't imagine what he's thinking, how we just would sit aside as Christians willingly. Oh, we better not open, oh, they might come and get us. And, oh, what about insurance coverage and liability? And, oh, dither. The church normally leads. And the church in Pennsylvania, very few are leading. In the summer, we got to go to 4 services here because, the virus. Open up. Let people decide on themselves. If they're vulnerable, stay home. If you're in a vulnerable case, if you're over 70 or 65 and above, or you have pre-existing health conditions, stay home. If you're comfortable wearing a mask, wear one, but don't oppress everyone else. In any other part in history, when there was a plague or pandemic, you quarantine the sick and you protect the vulnerable. In Pennsylvania, we quarantine everybody and we dumped the sick with the vulnerable under our failed Secretary of Health, Levine. You can't make this stuff up. 19 March. Our Secretary of Health is only one of 5 Secretary of Health thought it was a good idea to contaminate our elder facilities. And so that's why we have some of the highest death rates in the nation because of our failed secretary who has oversight over those homes. And that was the job even before the emergency order and has failed miserably. So walk as free people. Spiritually, I think, for Christians in Pennsylvania, our priorities have been mixed. I'm guilty of this too. We're so busy running around. We have all these events to run around to and, taking the kids here and there, got our own little stuff to do. We have our own, own subcultures we're supporting and all that. I think take measure and let's now focus on what's more important because we're about to lose the very freedoms here that give you the ability to be so busy. And if you lose these freedoms, you'll never get them back. And that's why it's so important that we do stand together here and reassert our rights. I am no one special. I don't overplay my military service. But I do want to say this here, is having actually worn a uniform for 30 years in active duty, I see the price paid, and I understand the price paid. It's a dear price in blood and treasure, so much sacrifice, and that we just cast aside so easily these freedoms here that we've taken for granted. Every day we wake up, they're still there. And then to have them, on the cusp of evaporating, being yanked away from us. And so many people standing aside. The royalists, of course, willing to give up their freedoms because they love their governor. But politically, of course, on the other side, they hate our president. And so it's all politics and alignment. But, in the end, that they'd be even willing to give up their rights, it reeks of fallacy and of foolishness. And that's why Stalin derogatory called those who supported him useful idiots. And so he used them to advance their agenda. And then they find in the end themselves in a gulag, being re-educated when they thought they were the great champions of socialism, in his case. So for us spiritually, we are in a spiritual war. Pray for your leaders. And when people say pray for your government, almost all my life, I go straight to the president. God, please bless our president. Now we're at that point. It's like, well, what about our governor? What about our senators? What about Senator Mastriano? He sure does need prayer. And so what you should pray for, and I ask people, and keep this in mind here. I've been asked this, so I obviously refine this here as I go. So how do we pray for you? And I say, pray for the courage of Joshua and the discernment of Daniel and the heart of David and the double portion of Elisha and the favor of Esther and the wisdom of Solomon. Jesus says in James that if you have not because you ask not. So ask that God to bless your leaders with all those skills here. And then maybe we'll get things back in line. We're still missing something. We're together, we're marching, we have a movement. It's funny. So last month I reached 3.5 million people. So normally reach is well above engagements. My engagements are 5 million. So I have people who are excited about what's going on here. They're concerned and engaged. Stay engaged, stay in the fight. But channel that energy in contacting your reps and senators, and also asking God to give us wisdom and discernment on how to win. We need divine revelation because we can't do it in the flesh. And ask God, how can you make a difference? And ask him, how can you make a difference? Maybe he's going to ask you to run for office. And don't be like Jonah and run in the opposite direction. You'll want to run as I wanted to, and as Rebbe wanted to, my wife. You want to run from that. It's really hard, and it costs a lot. It takes a lot of effort. If he's calling you, though, it's going to work out. Doesn't mean you'll get elected, but it's going to work out, in his fashion. So pray if he'll lead you to run for office. We're seeing how important local officials are and county officials. Pray if you're not led to run for office, and it should be a calling, then pray, so God, who can I support? Who can I help? And so that's another way you can play a key role, because it's not easy to run a campaign no matter what level, whether local or state or national. And then in the end, make the best of the time you have with your own family, and, raise them up, teach them the history, and show them the cost of freedom here. And it's in our backyard here at Gettysburg, which is very convenient. And there's so many stories, each monument. And each monument is a part of our history. When the last thing, and I'll wrap it up, as the children of Israel were finally going to the promised land, Moses just died, Joshua was appointed as leader, God sends them across the Jordan River, it dries up, they go on dry land, and God says to Joshua, get one member of each tribe of Israel to grab a big stone, I assume it's big, but grab a stone out of a dry riverbed and pile it on the west bank, on the Israel side. And, and God explains, why would you do this? So you and your children go by and see that monument. You'll remember what the Lord your God did for you. And so these monuments we have in Gettysburg, they're not based off of myth. And any left-wing historian says that, they're full of nonsense. Because I've done live feeds by some of these monuments, and there's no myth there. Here is where the 57th Regiment of Pennsylvania fought. They were recruited from Western Pennsylvania, Somerset, and Mercer counties. Here's the men that fought. Here's how many that died. We put this monument here in honor of all those who died on this day, 2nd of July, 1863. I don't see any myth there. They're monument stones to remember the price of freedom, to remember George Porter, my wife's great-great-uncle, who was in the Sherfy house and captured and lost his life defending Pennsylvania there, and firing that last volley, and firing that last shot in defense of his home state here cost him his life. And so many hundreds more with the same thing with a heart. Failed bayonet attack of the 99th Pennsylvania to stop the Confederates on the way up Little Round Top before Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain was in position. For Pennsylvania and our wives, and they charged. And it's like, why would they lose all their lives? They're not knowing that they were going to buy the 20th Maine 15 minutes to get in position there to defend Little Round Top. So those are there to remember. So you remember not only what they did, but also what the Lord your God did behind all that.
And learn from history. Learn how to move forward. And I remember a year ago, I think when I met you, one of the first things you said is, what's our strategy? How are we going to move forward? And that's something that I pray for you.
Thank you.
And for our legislators, because you come up with the strategy and you can make it legislation so that the people need to follow that. And that was actually when William Penn first wrote the first frame of government. The idea was to bring justice, to bring freedom for all, and it was to have the government, the branches of government come together and effectively make us treat each other well. When it wasn't in our hearts to do it, those of us that had it in our hearts, we would dwell peaceably. Those that didn't, we needed laws to help to put that in place. And so really, we thank you, and we've heard a lot of good wisdom for how we can engage with government and how we can support and to follow the things that you're telling us about. And so we really thank you for your leadership and your colleagues, because I know that the colleagues have rallied together to make sure that you maintain the freedoms for all in Pennsylvania. And so we thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the time. God bless you guys too.